The Galactic Council chamber hummed with quiet efficiency, a grand hall where dozens of alien species convened to discuss matters of governance, trade, and, when necessary, war. Towering pillars of polished obsidian loomed over a circular table where representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy debated in crisp, calculated tones. Their discussion spanned everything from interstellar diplomacy to military strategies. Yet tonight's meeting had taken an unusual turn. The topic of discussion: humanity. Ambassador Xel'Thar of the HFY Dominion, a tall, insectoid being with multifaceted eyes and needle-thin limbs, clicked his mandibles in mild amusement. I failed to comprehend the reasoning behind the Council's recent inclusion of humans in military operations. Their physiology is suboptimal, their coordination laughable, and their reaction times abysmal compared to nearly every other species in this chamber. A murmur of agreement rippled through the hall. The HFY were renowned for their unparalleled reflexes, their exoskeletal bodies moving with precision beyond human comprehension. Beside him, Representative Valar of the Xel'Tharian Compact, an avian-like species with 4 delicate arms, waved one feathery limb dismissively. Indeed, I have observed them firsthand. Their movements are sluggish, their manual dexterity woefully inadequate. If we require sharpshooters, why not deploy my people instead? The Xel'Tharian possess unparalleled vision, capable of perceiving shifts in light undetectable to the human eye. Across the chamber, Admiral Toval, a veteran strategist from the Xener Consortium, exhaled through his gill-like vents. His amphibious features, usually passive, now held a trace of irritation. This debate is pointless. The humans have already been admitted into the Council's defense force. Let us instead determine the extent of their usefulness. The murmurs of dissent did not subside. The prevailing opinion among the Council remained unchanged. Humans were, at best, a biological curiosity and at worst a liability in high-stakes combat. Their species lacked natural armor, enhanced senses, or preternatural speed. While their industrial advancements were commendable, their physical limitations were glaring. The galaxy had long since evolved past the need for brute force alone. Wars were fought with precision, grace, and unparalleled control. Humans, in comparison, were little more than lumbering brutes. It was then that the human representative spoke. Commander Elias Brennan sat at the far edge of the table, his posture relaxed, but his steel-gray eyes sharp. He was a man of few words, a soldier who had spent years adapting to the intricacies of interspecies warfare. Unlike the other representatives, he wore no flowing robes or ornate insignias. His uniform was standard issue, practical, with only a small insignia denoting his rank. He let the silence linger before speaking. "You think we're clumsy?" His voice was even, devoid of the anger he might have felt. "Slow. Inferior. That's fair. We don't have 4 arms. We don't see into different spectrums of light. We don't have the reflexes of a HFY." He leaned forward slightly, the faintest hint of a smirk at the corner of his mouth. "But let me ask you something. When was the last time any of you fought a war where the enemy wasn't in your direct line of sight?" The chamber grew still. Brennan continued. "You speak of precision as if it's purely a matter of reflexes, of vision, of hand-eye coordination. But true precision isn't just about reaction speed. It's about calculation, anticipation, adaptability." He tapped a gloved finger against the table. "Humans have fought wars for thousands of years, long before we even left our planet. And in those wars, we learned that the best way to win a fight isn't always with brute strength or agility." Xel'Thar clicked his mandibles again, this time in irritation. "Elaborate?" Brennan nodded. "Snipers." A flicker of confusion crossed several alien faces. The term was known, of course, but it carried little weight among species who relied on direct engagement. The very idea of warfare conducted from extreme distances, with an enemy never seeing their attacker, was foreign to many of them. Brennan continued, his voice unwavering. "A human sniper doesn't need to be the fastest. They don't need to be the strongest. They don't even need perfect eyesight. What they need is patience, an understanding of wind resistance, gravitational pull, atmospheric distortion. They need the ability to calculate a shot that will land on a target thousands of meters away, adjusting for factors no other species in this chamber even considers. And when they take that shot, he exhaled, slow and steady. They don't miss. The words lingered in the air. Admiral Toval regarded him carefully. An interesting claim, Commander, but a claim nonetheless. Do you have proof? Brennan's smirk deepened. Give us the opportunity, and we'll provide it. Xel'Thar scoffed, his mandibles clicking in a sound eerily similar to laughter. A bold proposition. And what do you suggest? That we hand you a rifle and let you prove your so-called superiority against the best marksman in the galaxy. Brennan shrugged. That's one way to do it, but I have a feeling we won't have to wait long for a real test. And as if the universe itself had been listening, an urgent chime echoed through the chamber. A Xenar officer rushed into the room, his amphibious features contorted in alarm. Counselors, we have received word from the outer colonies. The Xel'Thar Dominion has begun their advance. Their forces are overwhelming our defenses. The war has begun. The room erupted into activity. Ambassadors whispered in hushed tones. Strategists consulted holographic displays, and military leaders issued urgent commands. The Council had anticipated conflict, but the speed of the Xel'Thar assault was unprecedented. The Dominion's warriors were among the deadliest in the galaxy, their heavily armored bodies resistant to most standard weaponry. Entire fleets had fallen to them before. Brennan stood, adjusting the cuffs of his uniform. He glanced at the assembled representatives, his expression unreadable. Well then, he said, his voice carrying just a hint of amusement. Looks like you'll be getting that proof sooner than expected. The first reports from the front were grim. The Xel'Thar Dominion had struck hard, and without mercy, sweeping across the outer colonies like a wildfire. Automated defense grids barely slowed them. Armored battalions fell in hours. The Dominion's forces were built for war, massive, thick-skinned warriors encased in nearly impenetrable energy shields, advancing with the relentless certainty of a tide. Conventional weapons barely made a dent before their soldiers closed the distance and cut down defenders with brutal efficiency. Within days, the Galactic Council convened an emergency war summit. The chamber that once hummed with quiet diplomacy now pulsed with frantic urgency. Strategists projected maps of fallen territories, their borders shrinking at an alarming rate. Commanders argued over tactics, searching for weaknesses in the Xel'Thar assault patterns, but the reality was evident. Nothing was working. Commander Elias Brennan sat at the edge of the table, silent, watching. The same representatives who had dismissed humanity mere days ago now spoke in panicked tones, their confidence eroding under the weight of the losses. We need a breakthrough, Admiral Toval stated, his gill-like vents flaring with frustration. We cannot win a direct confrontation. We need a way to eliminate their leadership, decapitate the Dominion's command structure. Xel'Thar, ever skeptical, clicked his mandibles. And how do you propose we achieve that? Their warlords remain entrenched behind layers of shielding and fortifications. Assassination teams cannot get close, and orbital strikes are useless against their planetary defenses. Silence settled over the room. No one had an answer. Brennan leaned forward, his fingers steepled. You don't need to get close. All eyes turned to him. The skepticism remained, but now it was tinged with something new, desperation. Toval exhaled. You're suggesting long-range elimination. Brennan nodded. Exactly. Your soldiers have been fighting the way they always have. Engagement at optimal range, leveraging superior technology. But the Xel'Thar thrive in close combat. You're playing their game. Change the rules. Xel'Thar let out a dry chitter. You expect us to believe that one of your people, with your sluggish reflexes and inferior vision, can accomplish what our most elite assassins could not? Brennan didn't react. Instead, he tapped a small device embedded in his wrist, pulling up a holographic profile. A single name and a string of commendations scrolled across the screen. Captain Daniel Carter. Toval's gills flared slightly as he read the dossier. Sniper Division. Special Forces. Earthborn. He looked up. You think he's capable of this? Brennan allowed himself a small smile. I know he is. The council chamber's atmosphere shifted. Skepticism remained, but it was now accompanied by something else: consideration. The losses against the Dominion were too great, the desperation too deep. And for all their dismissal of humanity's abilities, none of them had an alternative. Toval made the decision. Get him ready. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The battlefield was unlike anything Carter had seen before. The war had ravaged this world. Once a thriving colony, now a wasteland of shattered structures and smoldering wreckage. The air hung heavy with the acrid scent of scorched metal and ozone. In the distance, the remains of a downed starship jutted from the earth like the skeleton of some long-dead beast. Beyond it, past the crumbling ruins and scattered debris, lay the real target: the Xel'Thar Command Center. Carter adjusted his rifle, feeling its weight settle against his shoulder like an old companion. The weapon was custom-built, an amalgamation of human engineering and alien advancements. But even with all its enhancements, the shot he was about to take was the kind of thing no machine could calculate alone. The target was nearly 3 kilometers away, nestled within an armored stronghold, surrounded by a network of energy shields and heavy artillery. Any conventional approach would be suicide. But Carter wasn't interested in convention. He exhaled slowly, letting his pulse steady. The wind was a problem, gusting unpredictably across the ruined cityscape. Gravity here was slightly weaker than Earth's, which meant the bullet would travel farther faster. Temperature fluctuations created atmospheric distortion, warping visual markers. Even the planet's rotation had to be factored in. A Xel'Tharian spotter, perched beside him, studied the readouts on his visor with increasing doubt. "This is impossible," he murmured. "There are too many variables." Carter didn't respond immediately. He was already working through the calculations in his head, adjusting for every unseen force that could throw his shot off course. Finally, he said, "It's not impossible. Just complicated." The spotter hesitated. "Even if you hit the target, the Xel'Thar's shielding." Carter adjusted his scope, focusing past the barriers, past the defenses, to the one vulnerability they hadn't accounted for. The warlord's second-in-command stood at a balcony, conferring with his officers. Just for a moment, the angle was perfect. A single, unshielded patch of exposed flesh beneath the jaw. A gap the size of a coin. Carter's finger tightened on the trigger. A breath. A heartbeat. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, and the shot split the air. Time seemed to stretch as the bullet carved its way through the ruined cityscape, cutting across the distance, slipping past the shifting gravitational fields and atmospheric distortions. The Xel'Tharian spotter followed its trajectory with his enhanced vision, watching as it slipped through the balcony's narrow opening, and found its mark. The Xel'Thar officer jerked once, a stunned expression frozen on his face before his body crumpled. The entire command center erupted into chaos. Carter lowered the rifle, already recalculating. "That's one." The spotter could only stare. He had witnessed precision before, but not like this. Not from a species the Council had deemed clumsy, imprecise. He turned to Carter, awe creeping into his voice. "You never even saw his face." Carter allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Didn't have to." Below, the Xel'Thar forces scrambled, their defenses shifting. But it was already too late. Carter had the next target in sight, and he didn't miss. The Xel'Thar command structure fractured within minutes. Confusion rippled through their ranks as their officers collapsed one by one, struck down by an unseen hand. Panic was a foreign concept to the Dominion's warriors, but now it festered among them like a spreading infection. Their soldiers, bred for relentless, close-quarters combat, found themselves powerless against an enemy they couldn't even detect. From his vantage point, Carter remained still, exhaling slow and steady. His rifle was an extension of himself, his scope a window into a battlefield that he controlled with a patient, unshakable precision. The Xel'Thar had made a mistake. They had assumed war was a contest of strength, of speed, of raw physical power. They had not accounted for patience. The next shot lined itself up before he even fully registered it. Another high-ranking officer barking orders, desperately trying to regain control of the crumbling formation. Carter adjusted for the shifting wind, compensated for the gravitational drag, and squeezed the trigger. A dull crack split the air. 3 seconds later, the warlord staggered. A neat hole punched through the unarmored gap at the base of his skull. He crumpled forward, face first, his command terminal flickering with abandoned directives. The spotter beside him, still struggling to process what he was witnessing, whispered, "This isn't war. This is execution." Carter didn't respond. The mission wasn't over. Through the scope, he saw the true target emerge. The Dominion's supreme warlord, High Marshal Cravox, stood in the heart of the fortress, his massive, armored frame nearly impervious to conventional weapons. His personal shield pulsed with an energy field thick enough to absorb direct plasma cannon fire. He had been deep within the command center moments ago, but now he had stepped into the open, fury radiating from his every motion. The deaths of his officers had forced his hand. He had come to take control personally. This was the moment Carter had been waiting for. The warlord's shield was impenetrable, but shields required power, and power required infrastructure. Carter had been studying the battlefield for hours, long before he took his first shot. He had mapped the fortress's power grid, analyzed the pathways that fed into the shield generators. He had seen the subtle distortions in the air, heat signatures, energy fluctuations, the minute details no other species would have noticed or cared to interpret. 300 meters to the left of Cravox, partially buried under rubble, was a cylindrical relay station, a crucial node in the power network, keeping the shield intact. One bullet. That's all it would take. Carter shifted his aim. The shot was more complicated than any before it. The relay's casing was reinforced. He had to hit it at precisely the right angle to cause a cascading failure. More than that, he had to time it perfectly, ensuring Cravox was far enough from cover when the shield flickered. He tracked the warlord's movements, waiting. There. Another breath. Another heartbeat. He fired. The relay exploded in a chain reaction, the power surge destabilizing the shield for a fraction of a second. It was all he needed. Carter had already chambered another round, already adjusted his scope. Cravox turned, reacting to the sudden disruption, just in time to see his doom approaching. The final shot cut through the air, bypassing the now failing energy barrier, slipping past the layers of armor that had once made him untouchable. A single, clean hole appeared in the warlord's throat. For a moment, Cravox stood frozen, massive hands reaching for something that was no longer there. Then, with a slow inevitability, he toppled backward. The battlefield was silent. The Xel'Thar forces, bred for unwavering loyalty, watched as their supreme commander collapsed, lifeless. The Dominion had never known retreat, never surrendered, never faltered. But now, their command chain lay in ruin. Their invincible leader felled by a force they could neither see nor understand. And with that, the tide of war shifted. By the time Carter exfiltrated, the Xel'Thar forces were in full retreat. Entire divisions abandoned their strongholds, their once coordinated assault devolving into disarray. The Galactic Council's forces, reinvigorated by the sudden turn, pushed forward, reclaiming lost ground with ruthless efficiency. What had once seemed an inevitable defeat became an overwhelming victory. The Council's war chamber was silent when Carter entered. The same figures who had mocked humanity mere days ago now sat in stunned silence, the weight of their misjudgment heavy in the air. Finally, Admiral Toval spoke. His voice, always measured, carried something rare, genuine respect. We reviewed the battlefield reports. Every shot, every kill, every calculation. He exhaled. I won't waste words, Captain Carter. What you did was beyond anything we thought possible. Xel'Thar, who had been the most vocal in his skepticism, studied Carter with an intensity he had never shown before. Finally, with great reluctance, he bowed his head ever so slightly. It appears we misjudged your kind. Carter gave a small shrug. You thought we were clumsy. Toval's lips quirked in something that might have been the ghost of a smile. A mistake we won't make again. The chamber was silent for a long moment before Valar, the Xel'Tharian representative, leaned forward. I must ask, how? How do humans do this? What makes you capable of such precision? Carter glanced around the table, meeting each pair of alien eyes before he finally answered. Because when it matters, he said simply, we never miss.